Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host. She wishes she was an inch taller so she could say she was 6 foot, Leanne Hughes.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you create unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work. Last week on the show, it was a solo episode, and I was sharing a bit of how I made friends and influenced online colleagues on a project last year and strategies that have worked, because a lot of us are having to build relationships and influence decisions without actually being able to step into someone's office to get them to move on these things. And so how do you do that in an online world? I had great feedback on that. So thanks so much for listening. And again, for joining us this week. This week is an interview, and a lot of the content on this show is all about confidence, getting that confidence as a facilitator. And it's also about being authentic and stepping into who you really are. But sometimes that can be difficult to figure out. I mean, like, what is conditioned and what is inherently you? And we can often raise that metaphorical mirror, working on the reflection questions. And today's guest is here to sort of accelerate that process for us. And she also believes that phrase, fake it till you make it, is an absolute myth. Curious? Well, I think you'll enjoy listening to my conversation with Leslie Ehm. Leslie will reach into your soul, pull out your most powerful, authentic self, and help release your badass swagger into the waiting world. What a cool value proposition. Now, as a former TV host and advertising creative director turned training guru, Leslie has spent decades traveling the globe with her award-winning company Combustion, working with executives and teams from top organizations like Google, Disney, Pepsico, TD Bank, Uber, HBO, Lenovo, and more. I think you might have heard of a few of those companies. Leslie has turned technologists into creative forces, bankers into storytellers, and has brought a serious dose of badassness to boardrooms everywhere. I love her language, and you'll hear her use it in this conversation. Now, fueled by her unrelenting passion for developing human potential, Leslie is now a swagger coach, author of Swagger, Unleash Everything You Are and Become Everything You Want, and a keynote speaker. She's been called better than therapy, a rock star, ass-kicking, a force of nature, and even a witch. And she's there for all of it. Now, her book comes out in May, but you can join her Swagger Collective and sign up for some of her goodies. All of that is in the show notes for this one, including Leslie's contact details at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 160. You can also support the show and my ideas, which I usually generate over a coffee, by heading on over to buymeacoffee.com/Leanne Hughes. Hey, thanks to Fiona Crichton this week for the coffee shout. It's amazing. I really appreciate you listening into the show and for supporting my caffeine addiction. The Flipchart Facebook group is going off right now. Lots of ideas, lots of questions, lots of awesome discussions. You haven't signed up already, head on over. It's free. Just search for the Flipchart on Facebook and we'll see you in there. What I love about Leslie's work is she started as a content and subject matter expert and realized there was more to it than that. The mindset, how people show up in the world, and what it takes to bring that swagger along and how she unleashes that. And she gets into really specific details on some workshop experiential activities that she's run to do that. She's full of energy, full of enthusiasm. It was a really awesome conversation. I just loved chatting to her. The video is also on YouTube, which you can find in the show notes. Okay, let's just jump into this episode. I'm so delighted to welcome onto the First Time Facilitator podcast, Leslie Ehm. Leslie, thank you so much for swaggering onto the podcast today.
Well, you know what? If you open the door, I will swagger through. It's just the way I roll.
Now, listeners at this stage are going, what on earth are you talking about? Now, Leslie, you are a swagger coach. I just love that job description. No one in high school said I could become a swagger coach. So what kind of experiences led you down to the path of what you do today?
Well, I came to this in a really interesting kind of organic way. I launched my first training company in 2008. And I had been an advertising creative director who recognized that I could not really help the people in my organization from the inside. And I was too busy putting out fires and dealing with clients, and I couldn't nurture the talent that I had around me. And that was really hard for me. And I came home one day and I said to my husband, I feel like I'm using my superpowers for evil instead of good. And he said, oh, what are you going to do? I said, I want to quit my job and start a training company. And he said, are you out of your mind? First of all, you hate training. And second of all, you are like totally untrainable. I said, right? Who better to start a training company than someone who hates training and who's totally untrainable? Because if I can create experiences for people like me, then I'm probably onto something. That's what I did. And I had no experience. I had no background other than the fact that I had been sort of, creatively driven my entire life. I was a former TV host. I was a former singer and a script doctor and a script editor. My family had owned a children's summer camp, so I was very used to creating, activities and things for large groups. And I was a performer, and I had the background of advertising. So I thought, I'll start with my people first. I'll start training advertising people, and I'll use the things that I am a subject matter expert in. This felt very logical. So I did my thing, and I was right. Who better to do it than me? Because it just took off like crazy. It was magical because we spoke the language of ad agency, or I spoke, eventually became a we, but initially it was an I. I spoke their language. I understood their pain. I had the skills to share with them, and I was fully invested in their success. I didn't have to worry now about the politics and things, and I was just invested in their success. And the company grew and evolved. I eventually rebranded and so on and so forth. And before I knew it, we had gone beyond the agency world, and we were training companies like Google all over the world. We developed and delivered Google's global marketer training program. And we went from like Hamburg to Singapore to Tokyo to London to Chicago to New York. We did that for 4 years. And that was just one of the gigs that we had. So there were very specific things that I focused on, regardless of the subject matter, be it creativity or storytelling, presentation skills, communication, leadership. What I cared about was the experience of each human being. And I wanted to show them what their true potential was. And it was on this quest to do this that I discovered a fundamental human truth. No matter what the culture, the country, the company, the level, CEO down to new entrant, it did not matter. 99.9% of people did not believe that who they were authentically was enough to bring them the success that they dreamed of. And they were all trying to fake it till they made it. They were tied up in knots. They were so afraid and insecure and riddled with the imposter syndrome. And it broke my heart. So what I started to do was, regardless of the subject matter, I would start layering on this really interesting twist where I found ways to kind of unleash and unlock people's truth. And when I did that, it was so liberating for them, and it was so affirming for them to see how the other people in the workshops reacted to their truth that I went, that's it. That's the secret, right? It's great to train, content like, expertise and hard skill, soft skill. But for me, the sweet spot was I understood how to see people, how to see their truth and help them to release it. And I called it swagger. But the swagger that I'm talking about is not that show-offy, fronty, peacocky, in-your-face, arrogant thing. The way that I define swagger is the ability to manifest who you really are and hold on to it in the face of all of that psychological crap that's going to come for it, regardless of situation or environment. So you are one person, one face, one heart, one truth, and you show up the same no matter what the situation is, and nobody can change you. That is what swagger is.
Oh my goodness. There is so much in that story. We could go in many different directions. First of all, big congrats on your training company. And a lot of people listening to the show, when I started the show 3 years ago, I was working internally, same as you. I'm like, gosh, most of this training sucks. Like, I want to deliver something awesome. I haven't got Google on my books, but that is absolutely incredible. So well done to you. Dive into this swagger stuff then. Because, we can talk about the business stuff a little bit later. You mentioned that phrase, fake it till you make it, and how all of us are sort of just walking around and everyone's just like not really sure of themselves. Do you believe in that phrase?
I think that fake it till you make it is the dumbest thing that anyone can do to themselves. It is the worst thing that we can do to ourselves, because here's what happens. As soon as we get into that, I'm going to pretend that I know more than I know. I'm going to pretend that I am fancier than I am, or that I'm more accomplished than I am. You create a prison of your own making. because now you limit your ability to reach out and ask other people for help and support in your growth and in your journey. So you end up stuck in that your own arrogance and your own insecurity combined has created. And we do it because we don't know what else to do. We don't know how to trust the things that we already have. We don't know how to trust where we are in our journey. And we think that the fake it till you make it is going to give us confidence. But here is the big fat lie and the big fat secret. You cannot have confidence without competence. Competence breeds confidence. Only when you've done something a bunch of times are you able to say, oh, I can do that. Yeah, I got this. All right. I can, I got some baseline of skills here. I'm all good. And then the confidence belongs to you. It's not subject to anybody else's opinion. It's, I know that I have done this enough times to know what I'm doing. Now, if I accept where I am in my journey, I can own the confidence that I currently have in that. The problem starts when people say, well, what if I haven't done something? What if I haven't experienced it enough and I'm trying to operate in the world and I need something to go on? And I say, okay, it's not about confidence. It's about self-belief, which is completely different than confidence, because self-belief is a choice that you make. Anybody can choose self-belief. Self-belief is really having this unerring, unflinching, unshakable feeling that you can jump off the cliff and you are not going to die. Yeah, you might hit a few branches on the way down. You might bounce. You might get a little bump or a bruise. You might fly. You don't know. But the one thing that you tell yourself for sure is, I'm not going to die. And anything that's going to happen in this endeavor that I give myself over to as a result of self-belief is going to lead me to confidence, which is going to lead me to confidence. It's a paradigm. And it starts with self-belief every single time.
Oh, absolutely. Look, this has really played out because I've started my own business, right? And then a lot of the stuff that you're pricing is yourself. So that is when I've seen this really play out. And I used to sort of roll my eyes when people would talk about mindset. And I'm like, just give me like the tactic, like tell me what I need to do. But honestly, and as you're talking about, it just comes back to, how do you think about yourself? How do you value yourself? And so a sort of an exercise I went through early in the game that was inspired by my business coach at the time was just jotting down like everything that I've achieved, all the education, all the professional development workshops, just getting that like in a spreadsheet just to go, right, actually you've got that. And hopefully that can sort of the confidence, also gave me that confidence to then go out into the world. I had a very similar chat.
Crucial.
Yeah. So where do we start then? And I think confidence is absolutely, and self-worth for any type of facilitator, right? I think we get really scared thinking I'm in front of the room, I'm having to lead this group of people who are more educated, have accomplished more. I haven't been an executive and I'm sort of facilitating a strategy day. There comes some like, am I worthy to even be in the room? So where do you suggest people start with building their self-belief? Is just telling themselves, and I can do this, I'm not going to die on the way down?
Well, there are three fundamental drivers of your swagger. One is truth. The second is intention. And the last one is self-belief. So when you break it down, it works like this. The only way you can manifest who you are in this world is by your words and your deeds. That you can only speak your truth and explain what you want to communicate and what you think is of value and so on and so on. That belongs to you and nobody can change that. Now, in the book, I talk a lot about the nuances of truth, not changing it, but getting really smart about when, where, to whom, and all of those details, because nobody wants anybody's truth just barfed all over them. You got to think about it in context of intention and self-belief. So intention is, why am I saying this or doing this right now? What is it that I hope to achieve? And I believe that swagger intention is always about contributing positively to the collective in some way, shape, or form. That if it's only about yourself, it's probably not going to go well, because you're going to get tripped up by arrogance and and tripped up by being self-serving, and it's need for lots of validation, and it gets very, very messy. So I say intention has to be, what do I hope this outcome is going to be for the collective and as a result for myself? Okay. How am I contributing positively to this? And then self-belief says, do I believe that I have the right to say this, that it will be of value to say this, and that there's no reason why I can't say it? That's self-belief. Self-belief is, why not me? That's what my mother used to always say to me, right? Why not you? Who is better to say or do this than you? Okay. So what I focus on is anytime we're in a situation, especially, listen, I've been there, done that, where you're in front of a room and you're saying, okay, I'm a subject matter expert in the thing I'm about to create. I may not be an expert in what they do, but they can't do what they do without me being here. Okay. So my truth is, I am going to create an experience for you that is going to help you achieve your goals. That's my truth. My intention is going to be, I'm going to make sure that every single person in this room experiences something magical and transformational, and I'm going to get this done like a badass, right? And the self-belief is, hey, this is not my first time at the rodeo. And I know that I'm here because they need me. If they didn't need me, they didn't need a facilitator, I wouldn't have a gig right now. So by being in service, the truth being, like, I can look someone in the eye in any room I go into and say, I'm here for you. And I have zero agenda. This is something that's really important for facilitators to say when they go into a room, to explain, although I've been hired by the company, I am here for you human beings in the room right now. And I'm in full service of you. I have no agenda. I have no politics. I have no I'm not judging you in any way, shape, or form. I have zero skin in this game other than to help you achieve your goals. So when I ask for your trust, there's no reason to not trust me. There's no agenda. What you see is what you get. I'm here for you. Now, you got to walk the talk, but it really contextualizes things for people, because I always point out to them, like, say, look, everybody else in this organization will have an agenda about you. Everybody, because you're a link in the chain, right? Your actions impact everybody else's actions, their status, their politics. It's the whole tribal thing, all of those things.
Yeah.
As an outsider coming in, I don't have that. So it gives me a lot of freedom to be in service in a really, really magical and profound way.
I love everything you're saying. Actually, I was just admiring the way that you talk. Like, it's so cool, like the language that you're using. I think it's amazing. I didn't say this earlier, but I'm so jealous of your previous career in like TV hosting and singing. It's like, oh my gosh, you got all these cool skills.
But what's funny about that, though, is that I found those things, while they were kind of cool at the time, I found them ultimately to be unsatisfying because I couldn't get enough back from it. I wasn't creating change. I thought that I wanted a platform because I had things to say and things that I wanted to accomplish, but I realized that it was kind of empty. And the work that I do now is so intimate and so profound. And it's when you work with someone, when you train a group of people and you encounter one of the people from one of your thousands of workshops that you've delivered in an airport or in a thing or in a meeting or somewhere around the world, like it happens all the time. And people will say to me, that workshop changed my life. I would never see it the same way again. And I will never forget what you told me. And they can recite back to you what you taught them 5, 7, 8 years ago. I mean, I cry. I freaking lose my, because I go, yes, that is my purpose in this world. This is my purpose, is to unleash human potential. And I touch a lot of people. I feel like I touch them more deeply and profoundly than I could have done in ways that would have been entertainment, but I changed them. I was part of that experience that changed them.
Oh my goodness. I think you're also going to be absolutely resonating. You might have some people that show up at the airport in a few years when we can fly and like, Leslie, I listened to that podcast. Because even what you're saying to me, it's just absolutely resonating. And it's 100% the reason that we got into this game of facilitation is because we want to create change. We want to, we want to help that. And as you said, being stuck in corporate where you're like, I'm trying to do this. And it's really tough when you're that internal person because like you said, you're all connected as part of this chain. Mm-hmm. So there is huge value being that external person. So you mentioned before you've touched thousands of lives. So what are your sort of delivery methods, like one-on-one coaching, group coaching, workshops, speeches? Like how do you put your message out to the world?
Well, pre-COVID, it was all workshops. I didn't have the bandwidth to do a lot of coaching, which I love doing, but I could, I was on a plane every 2 seconds. I was traveling all around the world. It was always 1 or 2 day engagement, sometimes in series. I liked doing the bigger, richer work. I had a lot of clients with whom I would do like 6-month long programs which was the best. I mean, I did these big, juicy leadership transformational projects where I would be working with a group of 20 people for a 6-month period. And those people, I can't tell you the kind of results we got. I did that program for 4 years with a multinational bank. And we had a 40% promotion rate out of that program. That's how effective it was, a 40% promotion rate. I love those big, rich ones where you could really develop a relationship. But everything I've always done is super experiential. The Combustion, my company's called Combustion. And our number one stated corporate value is love the people. When we walk into the room, you belong to us. And we're going to do everything that we can to create an experience. So we always come up with really interesting, challenging, weird exercises for people to do so that they can feel the concept, not just learn the concept. And we usually do it in such a way that they often don't see it coming.
You can introduce
something. Okay, let's see. I have so many things. Well, I'll give you an example of some of the transformational stuff that we used to do for presentation skills. Awesome. So these workshops were 10 participants at a time, which we with 3 modules, and we would do them over 3 separate days, usually 6 weeks apart. 2 groups of 10 that we would later combine into groups of 20. And we do some sort of, basic stuff about, the fundamentals of presentation skills and the psychology of presenting and connecting and all the rest of it. And then we would get each person to come up one by one and pull a little talking strip out of a cup. And it has something like, talk about the first time you fell in love, or talk about something that you lost in your life that was hard for you. Tell us a secret that nobody knows about you. It can be anything. I mean, I have hundreds of them. So I get them to do their thing. And I just watch. I watch and I make notes. I make notes on what they're trying to not show me and what I am really seeing. That is what I'm looking for. What are you trying to not show me? And what am I really seeing? And that's really one of my superpowers, is that I can see people. And so it's almost like a channeling exercise. And I make all of these notes. And then I give them a superpower name based on the person that is hiding, not who they're showing me, but the person that is hiding. And I do that one by one. I get them up one by one, no feedback, no nothing. After we've done everyone, I then get them back up one by one. And I then interpret for them what I wrote on that card. And they get so mind blown that they were seen. So I'll say to them, and you have to be careful because this is not therapy and it's not public humiliation. So you're looking for a way to validate the real person that's hiding under the surface and give that person permission to have voice and to come out of their shell, So I'll say, I can tell that you're really trying to be a good girl. You really like to follow the rules. But underneath, there is this little tweak of rebel in you. It's almost like you're pissed off about the fact that you have to follow the rules, but you're going to follow the rules because you're good. And you say this and you watch their faces and their faces just drop. And they go, how did you see that? I'm like, because I could see how restrained you are or held back you are, or whatever. Anyway, your superpower name is motorcycle sweetheart. Because you've got this conflict that you're sweet and good, but you've got this rebel edge to you. And it's such a superpower because you can shift modes. And then I tell them that all the ways that this is going to serve them. And then I get them to pull something else out of the hat. And I say, now let me see you. Once we do that, and then they come out and and everybody is watching and stuff, they're completely different the second time around. And everybody in the room loses their minds. Oh my God, that was so much better. That was so amazing. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it happens person after person after person after person. And then by the end of it, you're saying to them, you realize that the change you saw in someone else is the change they saw in you. So you all went through this transformation. People cry in these workshops on a regular basis. People say things out loud that they've never said before. I can tell you, do you want to hear a story? Like one of my favorite stories?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So I'm in a bank training senior level executives in a bank. This particular workshop was that foundational presentation skills workshop. They're all male. Everybody in their suits and their ties and their, sort of gray hair coiffed, the male fronty kind of thing. There's a lot of that going on. And we all know that energy, right? So we're sort of settling, in and so on and so forth. And I've done my sort of preliminary stuff, and I say, okay, so who wants to go first? Who wants to get up and do their thing? Of course, they all sort of and like look at each other like, who's going to go first? And this one guy, like a kind of a burly, happy-go-lucky kind of suited guy, says, oh, I'll go. I go, all right, come on up. What's your name? He says, Tony. I go, okay, Tony. So here's what I want you to do. Pull some strip out of the hat and just go for it. Just do your thing. Pull something out of a hat, and with 2 seconds, he's like strutting around. He literally, for your listeners, I'm making little guns out of my fingers. He's doing that, like pointing at us with his finger guns. And I mean, every cliche of like a good time Charlie that you could possibly imagine. And he's loving himself. He's smiling and he's whatever. And I said, okay, wait, stop. Tony, what the hell is going on? What is all of this business? He's like, what do you mean? So, okay, let me tell you what I see. You are the kind of guy who, if you had the cottage next to me, I could go fishing at 5 o'clock in the morning and discover that my boat doesn't start. I could go over to your place, knock on the door. You'd come out in your underwear and your t-shirt to help me start my boat. And you might even have a beer with me and go fishing at 5 a.m. His face drops. He said, how do you know that? I said, because I see you. And I don't know what all of this stuff is that you're doing, but it is obscuring who you really are. And who you really are is delicious and approachable and warm. And I just need you to drop the bullshit. He's like, oh, okay. So I said, I don't want you to pull something out of the hat. I want you to talk about something that's important to you. Just talk about something that's important to you. He goes, okay. And you could see there's like fear around the eyes now. He's like, what's going on? I've just been like, jujued. I don't know what happened here, right? And he starts to talk because he's on the spot. He just picks the first thing he can think of. And he starts to talk about his mother, his little Italian mother, and how she had brought the family from Italy to Canada, and how she created this life for all of them and was such a little tiny lady who was this fierce champion, and that she had so defined who he was. And as he's telling the story, like everybody's just quiet and listening to him. And then he says, and my mother, and then goes and clamps his hand over his mouth and starts to sob. And I was like, okay, Tony, you got this. Keep going, babe. You got this. He's like, my mother, I'm sorry. He turned his back, like both hands over his face. One of the guys got up and like hugged him in the middle of it and sat back down. I said, you got this, Tony. Keep going. He turned around again and he said, and when my mother died, I lost the sense of who I was. And he started to talk about how his whole identity had changed since his mother had passed, which had been relatively recently. And everybody in the room, like tears pouring down all of our faces. And I'm just like, I'm going to cry now. I was like, just keep going, Tony, keep going. And after it was over, I mean, he got standing ovation. Everyone, all his peers are cheering for him. And I go up to him and I throw my arms around him. And he says to me, like in my neck, he says, I don't know what happened. I said, Tony, you just found your swagger. That's what happened. That's one of my favorite stories of what the power of when you drop the front and you start to step into who you really are, and just how incredibly powerful it is for you and for the people around you. And his life did not end after that. He was not, shunned by his peers and all the rest of it. They saw him for who he really was and not for this good time Charlie bullshit that he was trying to sell.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so powerful. You think of like all those months or years of everyone, like even myself, like building up an identity and being the way we think we should be, and how that can actually, so what you're saying is it doesn't take all those years to then unravel it. It can be an intervention like that, like Tony had there. So my question for you is on discovering your swagger and who you really are. I do a lot of self-reflection activities and I answer questions and journal and all of that. And still I'm like, do I really know who I am? And you mentioned that your superpower is seeing that in other people. Does it take someone else to recognize that? Because I often find it, there's a quote that I like, you can't see the label when you're inside the bottle. And often I'm like, oh, is this really me? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Do you cover that in your book, or any tips for that?
Yeah, we've got a whole thing about
yeah.
discovering the real you. I mean, listen, swagger is an ongoing journey. It's not a switch that gets flipped. It's a series of steps and journeys, and it goes for your life. One of the things that I advise people to do is to do what I call analyzing the swagger gap. So I say, go and talk to someone who's known you since like 10th grade, who you're still friends with. So they know who you were when you were, unfiltered and unfettered, and, you didn't have a lot of front, because our front wasn't really developed when we're in 10th grade. And ask them how they see you. Just get a little feedback. So how do you see me? Why do you like me? Why are you friends with me? What do you think is interesting or different about me? Blah, blah, blah. Then go talk to somebody who's known you for maybe, 10 years. Or however long, however old you are, someone who's known you for a chunk of time. Say, tell me, how do you see me? What is it you think? Blah, 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 blah. Then go talk to somebody that you've worked with for a year and ask them how they see you. If everybody has a very different perspective, you have a big swagger gap, first of all. It means that you are being situational about who you are. And you haven't figured out how to hold on to the core of you and move it around with you. You kind of compartmentalize it and trot it out for different people at different times. The real you is probably more through the eyes of the person who's known you since 10th grade, because they've watched you evolve and grow, and we mature and we become more sophisticated and so on and so forth. But when we're with them, we are still ourselves because we feel safe and so on and so forth. So they get to see the more sophisticated version of ourselves, but we're not faking or fronting. We're just being more of a grown-up. And I trust that the most, because it's so interesting that when when you bump into someone that you haven't seen, in 10 years or 15 years or something, and you catch up, and you talk about what you've been doing over years and this and that, and then they, you tell them what you're doing, and they say, you were always someone who was so creative or so resilient or so this. I'm not surprised that you're doing what you're doing. It's like, yeah, because I'm the same now as I was then. That's who I was before I learned to hide who I was. I could be seen. So it's a really easy way to do it. Do a little quiz with a bunch of people and get some feedback and go, yeah. The other thing too is, I believe that we all have a voice in our head that tells us who we are. It's our job to sift through it and figure out what is being tempered or impacted by what I call our swagger blockers, the negative voices in our head, the inner critic, the inner saboteur. Because when we accomplish something, our first instinct may be, yay, good for me. I so earned that. I worked so hard. You have that. And then it doesn't take long before you go, but I don't know. Maybe it wasn't really that good. Maybe people aren't going to really like it. Maybe people just said it was good because they were trying to look good, and all of those things. That's the stuff you have to deal with. That's all the swagger blockers. But the stuff we tell ourselves when or before all of those things kick in, that's who we are. All the things, like when you get mad at someone and you go, screw you, I don't deserve blah, 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 but you don't say it out loud because you're afraid. The fact that you want to say it is who you really are. Right? And then it gets stuck in your blockers before you can get it out into the world.
Gosh, it's so good. It's funny you mentioned talking to old school friends. I remember going to my 20-year reunion a few years ago, and I was walking around going, gosh, everyone is exactly the same, but just like a 10x version of themselves. And we just sort of all slipped naturally into what it was like at high school. But people were just like, if someone was confident, they were even more confident, or funny, they were even funnier. Like, it was just amazing. So obviously their swagger would have been aligned, the people that I spoke to on that. Gosh, so many cool tools to actually figure that out. And I love that we are looking to other people to help us on that journey, and that it isn't just a one and done thing. It's like a continuing event.
There's something else.
Yeah,
go ahead. There's something else you talked about, what your business coach told you to do, which is to write down all of your accomplishments. This, I wanted to go back to it because it is something that is so kind of underestimated. The power of that is so underestimated, because when we experience insecurity in any way, shape, or form, it is not truth. It's that negative voice in your head that's been playing. It's like, it's the podcast from hell. It's episode 891 of the podcast from hell. And the podcast has been playing the same thing since episode 2. And we do a huge number on ourselves when we're insecure, and we let that tape play. It's not even relevant anymore. It's not true. It's not relevant, but it's going to play. It's going to play if we let it. So what I get people to do to stop the madness, I get them to write a letter to themselves from their inner saboteur. Give it voice. And the exercise is called Dear Loser. And we talk about it in the book. So please feel free to use this with any of your clients. It's my gift to you. Give it voice. So it's, dear loser, you think you're so, all of those terrible things that we say to ourselves. I want you to just get it out on paper, like really go for it. Don't hold back. And then what I do is I have them read it to me, and they go for it. All the rest of it can be very emotional, very cathartic, all the rest of it. And I go, okay, now let's talk about why that voice is full of crap. But we're not going to use opinion. We're going to use facts. So let's take this line by line by line and apply a fact from our lives that says, rebuttal, I don't think so. Let me tell you exactly why. And we write a rebuttal letter. And then I get them to condense the rebuttal letter into some kind of a mantra or a short form thing that they can use to interrupt the old voice every time it rears its head. Because we cannot stop the voice in our head, but we can record over it.
Great.
Something different.
Yes. I love that. Right? I love that analogy of the podcast and then recording a voice over the top of it, of course, because we're recording a podcast. And I'm just trying to think of like those voices in my head. Like sometimes I think I've attributed a lot of stuff in the past to, I was just really lucky. Like I was in the right place at the right time. But you think, hang on, no. Like the relationships were built, the work was done, like you did this, like, yeah. So all that stuff, I think that's a wonderful idea. I'm just geeking out so much on what you're offering. When's your book coming out? In May?
It comes out May 10th.
Okay.
It's available on all the fave bookseller platforms. If your listeners are interested, if they want to join the Swagger Collective, which is just a community that I'm building of subscribers. I'm not a big newslettery person. It's not my jam. It's not my thing, but I'm trying to pick and choose things that I think are going to be of value to like-minded swagger seekers and swagger lovers. So you can go to swaggerthebook.com or leslieehm.com and join the Swagger Collective. What you're going to get right away, because I got to spread the love, is you'll get a chapter of my book instantly. You're also going to get a proof of swagger assessment, a little fun little test that you can take to determine where am I in my journey? How am I doing? How am I tracking? And it's a good baseline for before you read the book, because after you read the book, oh my God, you are going to be able to unleash such profound swagger into the world. I mean, that's the title of the book, Swagger, Unleash Everything You Are and Become Everything That You Want. And it's, you guys will love it. Your audience will love it because it's all kinds of exercises in it. Super duper practical, all the rest of it. I actually have a companion workbook that I'm working with now so that it can go out into the world and do its good work. I want the book and the people who champion the book and facilitators and trainers to just, enjoy it and use it as a way to really help unleash the potential in the swagger in everybody they encounter.
And that's absolutely why we signed up to be facilitators and trainers. Everyone I talked to was like, I love that moment where I get a shiny eye or a spark of inspiration in my workshop. Like, that's why I do what I do. That's like the common response. So we're absolutely, I think this is a very well-timed conversation actually, because I'm sort of working a lot on this foundation of mindset, recognizing that any tactic out there it can be done, but it's all driven by how I see myself and how I share that with the world. And I love what you talked about in terms of I'm here in service. And I think Neen James, who was on the show, shared a very powerful quote. If you stand in service, you won't be nervous in relation to speaking. But it's same as what you're talking about. It's the collateral of us being of service is that we also serve ourselves. And
and the part of it too is to make sure that you are fully bringing yourself to the party as a facilitator, because when you do, you create an experience that is 100% unique, that nobody else but you could be creating. And the magic you create in that room could not be created by anyone other than you and the combination of those human beings who are in the room. You create something unique every single time, and you want to strive for that. You want to really push for that and say, I'm going to be the most me that I possibly can. So that is a unique experience for them. If you're trying to fit into some cookie cutter image of a facilitator or a trainer, you're trying to recreate something that has already existed because you've learned from things that have already existed. Do you, boo. Do not be afraid to fly your freak flag high in that room because it gives other people permission to fly theirs. And I wish people didn't need permission. Unfortunately, they do. And you have the power to give them that permission. Always respect their individuality, respect their experience. I'm all about love and respect, but let your freak flag fly. Just go all in and all out.
I just love it. This has been such an amazing conversation, Leslie. I just find like we're talking virtually, but I can just feel your energy through the monitor. Love your story, love what you're sharing and the value that you're bringing out into the world with your new book. And so we'll pop a link to all of that in the show notes for this episode, as well as contact details for Leslie. Leslie, you're a superstar. Thank you so much for swaggering in.
Thank you so much for giving Swagger a platform. I'm like the conduit for Swagger. So thank you for allowing Swagger to have a voice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight, and make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.